Good morning from Hopalong Hollow. This is Jerry. You may remember this garden. I did a video on this garden a few years ago when a walnut tree had fallen in here and I had to renovate this cottage garden here. And part of the garden is sun, part of the garden is shade. I told you back in that video this garden would fill in, and so it has. A lot of self-seeders in here, such as black-eyed Susan and coneflowers, are really pretty much taking over the show. In fact, so many I might have to thin them out and move some of them to other areas. But you can see the ground rose is looking like it's ready to pop. The only things that have bloomed so far have been the snowball bush in the corner, and in front of the snowball bush are these Rose of Sharon, which I've mentioned before. I love them. They're like, I call them hollyhock trees, because when they do get the blooms on them, which will be in July, late June and July, they'll be like the paper-thin, delicate hollyhock flowers in pink and white, I believe this one is. Here is the very common Daylily, which I didn't appreciate much because we have so many of them, but then I looked at its history and I really have a lot of respect for this plant now. This is the original Daylily that was brought to America, probably with the colonists. It comes from Asia originally. All other Daylilies were hybridized from this Daylily right here. And the interesting thing about this is it's completely edible. You can eat the buds, you can eat the tubers, you can eat the stems, and you can eat the flowers. And I have to confess, I've never tried them, but I am going to after looking at a couple recipes and a lot of videos online. Come to find out, this plant that I've not appreciated at all in the past, simply because sometimes when you have so much of something, you just take it for granted. And boy, do we have them, because that entire meadow over there has islands and islands of daylilies, which are not in bloom yet, but they're starting to. The daylily is named because the bloom only lasts for one day and then another one opens. So they really are day lilies. And in here we have the ever-present violet. What I've done in certain sections is I've yanked up a bunch of those violets and I've planted seeds. So I've got cosmos seeds coming up back here. Seashell cosmos, I believe those are called. And over here, picote cosmos. They're looking good. Of course, I have my ever-present barricades, which are protecting my plants from the marauding birds, my chickens, while they get established. And in here, I also have seashell cosmos. I found a dwarf bachelor button, which I've planted here along the borders. Oh yes, I see that the little seedlings are popping up. That's always a good thing to see, isn't it? What good news that is. Oh, a coneflower. Oh, I used to have trouble growing coneflowers, but once you get the hang of a plant, it just seems to become very friendly with you, and then suddenly you have them everywhere, which is a delight. It's always a delight to have a friendly plant, isn't it? A lot of my seedlings that I grew from scratch are in here. I'm so pleased with that. I wish I'd been doing that for years and years and years, but instead I've been wasting money on bedding plants and going to nurseries when I could have been growing them myself. So in there I've got verbascum, hyssop, blue globe thistle, all of them that I grew from seed in my little trays. I had hundreds of plants. I'm just so excited about that. I encourage you. I absolutely encourage you. It's never too late to start seeds. I'm going to continue doing seeds throughout the summer, because last year it was the first time I ever tried flower seeds in trays, and it was late in the year, late in the season. It was August when I had my little seedlings coming up. I actually transplanted them into the garden at that time, and they made it through the winter. And this year they're growing just beautifully. Okay, wow, looky here. Let's see, I can't remember what I dropped here. I think they're poppies. I think all these little seedlings here are purple gleam poppies, and we've had 3 days of rain, and it has done wonders for these lovely, lovely little plants, because here they come. Now this walkway, when I had done the rejuvenation of this garden, I turned it into a really wide walkway. Then I found every year that all these plants were dropping seedlings in between the stepping stones, and they were just taking over, and I was transplanting them. So I figured, well, this garden, it wants to be a bigger garden, and it doesn't want that long walkway, so I diminished it down to nothing but stones, so you can just walk right through the midst of the jungle here. Sometimes you just have to let your garden do what it wants to do, and not what you want it to do. So as you can see, this garden, although it's not really in bloom yet, except for a few things, it has done very well, and it just could end up being one of my favorite gardens on the property. Over here I've got my typical barricades up. I just want you to see the lovely little Canterbury bells that I transplanted from my trays, the blue lupine, and I transplanted them when they were quite small. I was experimenting to see how well they would do if I put them in when they were really tiny, because I really was running out of space, and they're doing just great. Underneath this mesh right here, I've got nasturtium seeds and pink primrose and purple gleam poppies, Dame's rocket. I've got larkspur planted here in this corner, and back there I've got polar bear zinnias, which are coming up. I planted those directly into the ground, the seed. It's helpful to know the difference between the seedling of a weed and the seedling of a plant, and that's just something you learn as you continue to garden. Here, for example, you can see the zinnias. They're pretty easy to recognize. That's a morning glory. I do want that morning glory because it will climb up this trellis. Last year this was covered in blue morning glories, just pouring over the top. And we have just a variety. Oh my goodness, there's a little bunch of mushrooms right there. Those are pretty too. This is a dwarf apple tree. I stuck it in the ground in autumn, and it was nothing but a dead-looking stick. You just never know, do you? Hyssop. Now, we've had 3 days of rain, and I think they've gotten almost a little bit too much water because they're getting a little bit yellow on those leaves. So I hope the sun just comes out today, and we're done with our rain for a while. But here is the garden before it really blooms. Come back in June when it really goes crazy. And this was the cottage garden renovation from a couple of years ago. And this is what it looks like right now. Pretty good.